The marble ballroom hushed when Eleanor Pemberton raised her glass. 300 guests turned. Silas Renwick stood near the lighting rig in a borrowed suit. Eleanor's voice carried, clean and cold. "Too poor to buy the silver on this table, Mr. Renwick. Too poor to court my daughter." Hadley froze between them. Silas did not answer. He did not move. In his inside pocket sat a folded envelope from Foster Linwood unopened. Dated 3 days earlier. Eleanor smiled at her own line. She did not know she had just declared war on the man who owned her company. April arrived in Charleston the way it always did, slow and humid. The azaleas opening on Trad Street like small acts of confession. Silas Renwick signed the lease on the Anson Street cottage on the 14th, paid 6 months in advance with a cashier's check drawn on a Boston account no one in town would think to query. The cottage was small, 2 bedrooms, a porch with a single rocking chair, a magnolia in the back that scraped the gutter when the wind came off the harbor. Wren picked her room. Silas took the other. On the second morning, Wren found a screen door at the back of the porch that did not close right. She showed it to her father in the language of an 8-year-old, which is mostly pointing. Silas knelt, looked, said the hinge was old, said he would fix it. He did not fix it that day. He did not fix it that week. The door stayed crooked because the only way to make sense of leaving Boston was to let small Charleston things be exactly as small as they were. The Beaumont Inn sat on Trad Street, 4 blocks south. 1847 brick and oyster shell mortar, the flagship of Pemberton Hospitality Group. Silas walked the site with the previous foreman on a Tuesday morning. The man pointed at the ceiling plasterwork, the failed cornices, the second-floor structural beam that had been quietly sagging for 11 years. Silas listened. He had read the engineering report twice on the plane down. The project kickoff was Thursday. He arrived 10 minutes early in a clean denim shirt and the kind of work boots that had seen real sights. Hadley Pemberton walked in 2 minutes after the hour, alone, no assistant, a leather folder under one arm. She was 36. She introduced herself to him by his first name. She introduced him to no one else. Silas opened the structural drawings on the table. He read them the way a pianist reads a score, not panel by panel but in chord. He flipped to sheets 3, tapped a connection detail at the second-floor beam, and said only, "This will fail under live load if we don't sister it before the demo begins." Hadley looked at the sheet. Then she looked at him. The look held for 1 second longer than a contractor's look should have held. Behind him, the door to the corridor opened a crack. Wren had been sitting in the foyer with a coloring book and had wandered. She peeked through the gap, 8 years old, dark braid undone on one side. Hadley saw her first. Hadley smiled the kind of smile that costs nothing in Charleston and means more than people remember. Silas saw the smile. He stepped between them without seeming to and said, "Wren, the foyer. I'll be there in 10. Wren went. Silas closed the door. He did not look at Hadley again until the meeting ended. At 7 that evening, on the kitchen table of the Anson Street cottage, he opened an old envelope he had carried since Boston. Inside was one photograph. Marin, summer of 2011, standing on the front steps of the Beaumont Inn in a yellow cotton dress, sun on her hair, the magnolia behind her. She was 28 in the photograph. She would have been 38 now. He turned the photograph face down on the table. Wren came in barefoot, holding a cracker. "Daddy, where are we?" Silas looked at the back of the photograph for a long moment before he answered, "Where Mommy used to be." Wren nodded, as if that explained Charleston. Then she ate her cracker and asked when dinner was. 3 weeks into the demo phase, Silas spread the subcontractor bids across the dining room of the cottage on a Saturday morning. He stayed at it past midnight on Sunday. By Monday at 6 a.m., he had the analysis written out on a single sheet of cream paper in his own hand. The historic plasterwork package was 38% above market. The vendor was Heritage Restoration Specialists, LLC. The principal of Heritage Restoration Specialists, LLC, was Bradford Pemberton, son of Eleanor's late brother. Hadley's first cousin, a contractor, could have ignored it. Plenty of contractors had, on plenty of jobs, in plenty of cities. The line item was inside the budget envelope. The work would get done. The premium would get absorbed. Silas did not ignore it. He left the page on Hadley's desk at the temporary site office at 7:20 a.m. before she arrived. The page was annotated in tight, even handwriting comparable transaction benchmarks across 4 southeastern preservation projects an IRR calculation on the embedded overcharge over the life of the contract, and at the bottom, one line of citation, being a Delaware Chancery case on the fiduciary duty of controlling shareholders. He signed it only with 2 letters. SR. Hadley read it at 8:04. She read it again at 8:11. She did not call Bradford. She did not call her mother. She did not walk down the hall and ask Silas Renwick what kind of contractor signed a bid analysis with a Delaware Chancery citation. She sat at her desk for a long minute, watching the harbor light catch on the cornice of the building across King Street, and then she opened a new email to the project's compliance counsel and requested a quiet rebid of the plasterwork package under standard arm's-length protocol. The rebid came in 19% lower. The contract was reissued the following Tuesday. Bradford Pemberton called Eleanor on Wednesday afternoon. Eleanor listened. Eleanor did not call Hadley. Eleanor opened her laptop and typed 3 words into a search bar. Silas Renwick contractor. The results were thin. A Boston builder's license, a small LLC registered in Massachusetts. A photograph from a Cambridge nonprofit board dinner, 4 years old, in which Silas wore a suit and stood beside a woman whose face was angled away from the camera. Eleanor closed the laptop. She picked up the phone to her assistant. Pull everything you can on the foreman of the Beaumont restoration. Quietly, that same Wednesday, Hadley passed Silas on the second-floor landing of the Beaumont. He was carrying a level. She was carrying a binder. They did not stop. She said only, "The plasterwork rebid came in cleaner." He said only, "Glad to hear it." Neither broke stride, but Hadley turned at the top of the stairs and watched him walk out of the corridor. She watched him the way a person watches a door she has been told never to open. She had been told all her life that no one outside the family ever saw what she saw: the small thefts, the soft fraud, the ways an empire bled itself in the dark. She had been told she was paranoid. She had been told she did not understand legacy. And here was a man in work boots who had read 4 sheets of drawing and 1 column of numbers, and seen exactly what she had been seeing for years. She did not know who he was. She did not know what his hands had done before Charleston. She did not know whose name was on his lease, whose patients had carried him here, whose grave he visited on long weekends in October. She only knew the analysis. The analysis was clean. The analysis was right. But she knew, for the first time in 11 years, she was not the only one looking. The Saturday at the end of May was the kind of Charleston morning that justified the city's existence. The harbor light came in low and gold across the battery. The cicadas had not yet started, and the magnolia in the walled garden behind the Beaumont was at the brief, white peak of its bloom. Silas brought Wren to the site because she had asked. She was 8 years old, and she had asked nicely, and the demo crew had the day off. He let her play in the garden while he sat upstairs on the second floor with a clipboard and a pencil, and the slow, exact work of measuring a window casing that had not closed properly since 1971. Hadley came down the brick path at 10:15. She had not known the child would be there. She had come because she came most Saturdays, because the walled garden was the only place inside Pemberton property that had never once felt like Pemberton property. Wren was crouched at the base of the magnolia, examining a fern. Hadley sat down beside her on the brick edging and asked the fern's opinion of the weather. Wren, without looking up, said the fern was busy. Hadley laughed once. It was the first time she had laughed inside Pemberton property in 9 months. She marked the fact privately, the way a woman marks the date of an unexpected letter. She did not say it out loud. She listened to the fern instead. After a moment, Wren said, "My mommy is in heaven. Daddy says heaven is the place where magnolias are quietest." Hadley did not answer right away. She watched the fern with Wren for a while. Then she said, "I had a cousin once who said almost exactly that. She loved this garden more than any place in Charleston. She taught me to read a balance sheet when I was 16. We used to sit on the bench right there, every Sunday. And she would point at the magnolia and say it was the only honest thing on the property." Wren looked at her. "What was her name?" "Marin." Wren tasted the word once silently. Then she nodded and went back to the fern. Upstairs, the second-floor window of the Beaumont was open 6 inches for the breeze. Silas had heard every word. He did not move. He did not move for a long time. The pencil rested on the clipboard. His hand rested on the pencil. Outside, his daughter was talking to a stranger about her dead mother, and the stranger was telling her about a woman she had loved who had also been his wife. And the 2 women were the same woman, and no one in the garden knew. He set the clipboard down with the care of a man putting down a thing that might break. He came down the back stairs 10 minutes later, took the boots off on the porch by habit, and walked into the garden in his stockinged feet. Wren ran to him. Hadley stood. She looked at him with a new kind of looking. He looked back at her with the same. Neither of them said anything. Neither of them moved closer. After a moment, Hadley said, "She was barefoot in this garden once too, in a yellow dress, 2011, I think. I have a photograph somewhere." Silas said, "I know the dress." That was all. He did not explain. She did not ask. They stood there in the garden until Wren's attention turned to a butterfly and pulled them gently back to a smaller, easier conversation. The unnamed thing was now a thing they were both carrying. Eleanor returned from New York on the 2nd of June, in a foul-polished mood. She had spent 3 days in meetings with a private equity firm about restructuring the Pemberton bond covenants, and she had not enjoyed the conversation. She landed at Charleston International at 4:20 and was at her office on King Street by 5:30. She walked past Hadley's open door without looking in. The annual Pemberton Charitable Foundation Gala was set for the 17th. Black tie, 300 guests, the mayor, the bishop, the head of the Historic Preservation Board, 4 major donors who had not been donors for 3 years and needed to be made donors again. On the 8th of June, Greta Eleanor's assistant of 22 years walked into Hadley's office and set a small ivory envelope on her desk without a word. Greta did not stay. Greta never stayed when she delivered envelopes from Eleanor. Hadley opened it at her desk. It was not a request. It was a paragraph and a half. At the gala, Eleanor wrote, she would be announcing Hadley's engagement to Whitman Ashcroft IV, son of the Ashcroft banking family of Broad Street. The Ashcrofts had been Pemberton allies for 4 generations. The match had been discussed at length with Whitman's father over a private dinner in March. Hadley would understand. The announcement would be tasteful. Greta would handle the press list. Hadley read it twice. She had not met Whitman Ashcroft IV in 8 years. The last time he had been 26, and had spilled a champagne flute on her shoes at a Spoleto opening. She walked down the corridor to Eleanor's office. Eleanor was at her desk. Hadley closed the door behind her and did not sit. "You did not ask me. I did not need to. Mother, you will marry someone who matches the empire. Hadley. Whitman is suitable. His family is suitable. The timing is suitable. We are not in a country where daughters of houses like ours wait to be courted by men who can afford them." Hadley stood in the doorway for a long, still moment. Then she walked out. She did not go back to her office. She drove south through the historic district with the windows down. She drove past the office at the speed limit. She drove past the marina. She drove past the house she had grown up in and did not slow down. She had spent her entire life accommodating Eleanor's certainties. The accommodations had become so quiet, she had forgotten what they cost. She drove to the Beaumont. She parked on the side street. She walked around to the harbor side porch, the one the crew did not use, and sat on the top step in the dark with her shoes off. It was 8:40 when Silas came around the corner from the cottage on Anson, called by some sight instinct, with a flashlight he did not turn on. He saw her on the step. He came up the path quietly. He did not ask. He sat down on the second step, one below hers, and set a cold bottle of water on the brick beside her hand. She picked it up, drank, set it back down. The harbor lights blinked across the water. A shrimp boat moved out past Sullivan's Island, slow and patient. 23 minutes passed. Neither of them spoke. When Hadley finally stood, she rested one hand briefly on his shoulder on the way past. Just once. The way a person touches the post of a railing she trusts. Then she walked down the path to her car and drove home. Silas sat on the step alone for another hour. He did not turn on the flashlight. The 17th of June arrived hot and clean. The marble ballroom of the Pemberton Mansion on Meeting Street had been open twice a year for 58 years, and not once in that time had it failed to impress. White columns, 3 crystal chandeliers, 1880, original to the house. A string quartet on the dais. 300 guests in black tie. The catering was Charleston rice and oysters. The wine was something dry from a Sonoma vineyard the Pemberton family had endorsed since 1994, and the chandeliers had been polished by hand on Wednesday by 2 women who would not be invited to any room in the house in which their work hung. The ballroom was at its best. It was always at its best. That was its only register. Silas was there as crew. The lighting installation had been added to the project scope at the last minute. and the crew lead was expected on site through the evening to manage the temporary rigs and the dimmer panel near the service corridor. He wore a borrowed black suit from one of the younger restoration men. The shoulders were a quarter-inch wide. He did not care. In the inside pocket of the suit was the envelope Foster Linwood had handed him 3 days before, in a parking lot off East Bay. He had not opened it. He had not yet decided what opening it meant. Hadley saw him from across the room at 8:12. She crossed. She did not greet him. She stopped a foot away, looked at the dimmer panel he was pretending to check, and said, "Thank you for the water," he said. "Of course," she said. "She's announcing it tonight," he said. "I know." They stood there for another moment, talking about nothing visible, and across the room, Eleanor watched them with the still and patient face of a woman who had decided. Whitman Ashcroft IV approached Hadley from the bar at 8:19, smiling the smile of a man who had been told what was about to happen. Hadley took one half-step back. Whitman's smile did not falter, but the room saw the half-step. 3 women near the dais saw it. Eleanor saw it. Eleanor set down her glass. She crossed to the service corridor where Silas stood and spoke to him alone, by the window. She had a folded check in her hand. "Twice your annual income, Mr. Renwick. Cashier's check. You finish the Beaumont through your crew lead by proxy, you leave Charleston in the morning, and you take the child with you. The Pemberton family wishes you well in Boston." Silas looked at the check. He looked at her. He did not raise his voice. He did not stiffen. He said only, "No, ma'am." Eleanor's eyes changed. She had expected anger. Anger she could manage. The calm was worse. She walked back to the center of the ballroom and lifted her glass for the toast. The hush spread out from her in a circle. "Before I welcome our extraordinary guests," she said, "I must address something that has distressed me this evening." The room turned. "There is a tradesman in this hall tonight who has been mistaken about his place in our city. He is too poor to buy the silver on this table, Mr. Renwick. Too poor to court my daughter. I trust you will not embarrass yourself further by remaining." Hadley froze between them. Silas did not move. In his inside pocket, the envelope from Foster Linwood sat folded, unopened, exactly where it had been for 3 days. Eleanor smiled at her own line. She did not know what she had just done. 3 days after the gala, on the morning of the 20th of June, Foster Linwood called Silas's cottage from his car. He did not identify himself. He gave one address, the Beaumont Inn service entrance, and one time, 2 p.m., and one instruction, come alone. Silas walked in through the kitchen at 1:58. Foster was already in the wine cellar. The cellar was a stone vault below the main dining room, 1847 brick, climate-controlled, normally locked. Foster had the key. He locked the door behind Silas from the inside. Foster Linwood was 62. He had been corporate counsel to the Pemberton family for 34 years. He had attended Marin's funeral in Boston in 2020 and had stood at the back of the chapel without speaking to anyone. Silas remembered the back of the chapel. He had not remembered the man. He should have. Foster had been the only person at that funeral wearing a Pemberton tie pin, the small silver magnolia, half hidden under the lapel. Marin would have known. Marin would have seen. He set 3 manila folders on the oak tasting table. "Sit. Sila sat." Foster opened the first folder. Renwick Holdings, Massachusetts Limited Partnership. Principal. Yourself, through 14 nominee LLCs, registered in Delaware, Nevada, Wyoming, and 1 in the Cayman Islands. Current position in Pemberton Hospitality Group voting common, 47.3%. Acquired across the period from January of 2019 through April of this year. Silas said nothing. He had known the number to the 3rd decimal. Foster opened the second folder. Eleanor's COVID-era leverage. Spring of 2020. She executed a margin facility against the family preferred share series, using the shares as collateral. She underestimated the duration of the downturn. By December of that year, she had quietly defaulted on the margin. The shares were liquidated through 3 intermediaries. 2 of those intermediaries were nominees of yours. She sold to the man she would later try to chase out of Charleston with a $10,000 check. Silas closed his eyes briefly. He opened them again. Foster opened the 3rd folder. Thursday morning. 9 a.m. board meeting. 14th floor of the Pemberton Tower. Agenda Item 3. Strategic restructuring. The restructuring removes Hadley Pemberton from her position as Chief Operating Officer and consolidates operational authority in the office of the Chair. Eleanor has the votes barely among the inherited family directors. She will frame it as protecting the company from Hadley's, quote, increasingly erratic judgment. She will reference the plasterwork rebid. She will reference the half-step at the gala. Silas looked at the third folder for a long time. Foster said, I have known this for 11 weeks. I am bound by attorney-client privilege on every conversation I have ever had with Eleanor Pemberton, but I am not bound to advise her of every conversation I have had with you. I am also not bound to advise her of the fact that I have been her counsel of record at the same time that I have been quietly making sure your filings cleared. I have walked a line, Mr. Renwick, that I am not certain I would walk again. Silas looked up. Foster met his eyes. You can stop it. Thursday morning. You can walk into that boardroom and stop it. But only if you are ready to stop being Silas Renwick, the contractor. Silas thought of Marin. He thought of Wren upstairs in the cottage, asleep with her braid undone. He thought of Hadley sitting on the harborside step in the dark, not asking him for anything. He nodded once. Foster slid the third folder across the table. Then, I will see you Thursday morning, the 25th of June. 9th floor lobby of the Pemberton Tower at 8:40 a.m. Silas Renwick rode the elevator to the 14th floor alone. He wore a charcoal suit cut 3 years ago in Boston by a tailor on Newbury Street. No work jacket, no scuffed boots. His shoes were polished. The folded envelope from Foster Linwood finally opened, sat in his inside breast pocket. The Pemberton board convened at 9 sharp. 12 directors. Eleanor at the head of the long mahogany table. Hadley to her left, in a slate suit, her hands resting on a closed leather portfolio. Foster Linwood at his usual chair, third from the corner, a stack of folders at his elbow. Eleanor opened. Good morning. Before we proceed to the operational reports, the chair will move under Article 7, Section 3, to address a strategic restructuring of the office of the Chief Operating Officer. I will not soften the language. Hadley's leadership has been a credit to this family for many years. However, the company is entering a period that requires consolidated authority. The chair proposes that operational responsibilities be temporarily reabsorbed into the office of the chairwoman, effective immediately, pending a strategic review. Hadley did not look at her. She kept her hands flat on the leather portfolio. The boardroom door opened. Silas walked in. He walked in calmly. He did not look around. He walked to the empty seat at the far end of the table, the seat that had been Beauregard Pemberton's decades ago, and had not been used since, and he sat. Hadley turned in her chair. Her breath caught. Once, silently. No one saw it but Foster, and Foster did not look up. Eleanor laughed. One short sound. I'm sorry, Mr. Renwick. What exactly is the contractor doing in a closed session of the Pemberton board? Foster stood. He pulled the top folder from the stack at his elbow and slid it the length of the table, past 4 directors, until it stopped in front of Eleanor. Madam Chair, Foster said, the contractor is the controlling shareholder. The room did not move. Eleanor opened the folder. 47.3%. Voting common. Renwick Holdings has general partner of 14 LLCs, each of which appeared in the share registry as a separate institutional holder. Notarized, audited, certified by Delaware Council of Record. Eleanor read the cover page. Then she read it again. Her face did not show shock. Her face showed the particular stillness of a woman who has just understood that she has been losing for 6 years without knowing it. Her left hand on the table was the hand that gave her away. The thumb moved once against the pad of the index finger. A small, dry motion. Foster had seen the same motion in Eleanor's mother in 1991, when a bond auction had gone the wrong way. He let it pass without acknowledgement. The other 11 directors received copies down the table. Silas spoke for the first time as himself. His voice was quiet. He did not stand. Under Article 7, Section 11 of the Corporate Bylaws, a holder of majority voting common may, by written shareholder action, remove the chair and appoint a successor without further board approval. I am exercising that right today. Eleanor Pemberton is removed as chairwoman, effective at the close of this sentence. Hadley Pemberton is appointed chairwoman and chief executive officer, effective immediately. Foster Linwood is retained as interim general counsel under a revised mandate. The strategic restructuring item is withdrawn. He set a single signed page on the table. Eleanor stood. She opened her mouth. She did not find the words. She walked out. Hadley remained seated, hands flat on the leather portfolio. Silas looked at her once. He did not speak. He stood up, crossed to the door, and left her the chair. She sat at the head of the table alone. Friday evening, 7:40 p.m. Hadley parked her car at the curb of the Anson Street cottage and sat behind the wheel for 2 minutes before she got out. Wren was already in bed. Silas had told her over peanut butter toast that Miss Hadley might come by, and Wren had nodded the way 8-year-olds nod about things they understand without being told. Silas opened the door before Hadley knocked. He poured 2 glasses of bourbon. Bullet, Marin's brand. He set them on the kitchen table, sat across from her, and waited. Hadley wrapped both hands around her glass. She did not drink. Who was Marin to you? Silas had practiced the answer many times over 6 years. He had never said it out loud. She was my wife. The kitchen clock ticked. Outside, the magnolia branch scraped the gutter once and stopped. Marin Pemberton Renwick. She came to Boston in October of 2013, after your mother forced her out of the company. She had been vice president of operations. Your mother told the board Marin had, quote, temperamental leadership. The vote was 8-4. Marin walked out of the Pemberton Tower at 11:15 on a Tuesday morning, and she did not come back. Hadley's eyes did not move from his face. I met her 4 months later. She was working at a hospitality consultancy on State Street. We married in May of 2014. Wren was born in 2017. Marin was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in November of 2018. She lived 18 months. She died on the 4th of February, 2020. Hadley made a small sound. Not a word. She kept working until the 7th month. She wrote a small book of essays on Southern hospitality history in the 8th, which her editor at a university press in Charleston published in May of 2020, and which is still in print in a soft, blue-jacketed edition. She named our daughter on a Tuesday afternoon in November of 2016. She chose Wren because she had read once that wrens build their nests in places no one expects. In her last week, she asked me one thing. She did not ask for revenge. She did not ask me to take it apart. She asked me to keep it standing. She said the company was the best of her. She said she wanted it to outlive the people who had broken it. And she said one other thing. He paused. She said her cousin Hadley would be ready by the time it mattered. Hadley began to cry then, without sound, the way women cry when they have been polite about grief for a long time. Silas did not move to her. He let her have it. She cried into her closed fist for almost 4 minutes. He sat across the table and watched the magnolia branch outside the window and did not look away from her grief and did not try to fix it. When she stopped, she lifted her face. Her eyes were red. She asked one question. Why didn't you take it for yourself? Silas answered without hesitation. Because Marin would have given it to you. Hadley closed her eyes. A long breath went out of her. The kind of breath a person releases when she has finally been told the thing she has been waiting to hear for half her life. She opened her eyes. She picked up the bourbon. She drank. He drank. Outside, somewhere down Anson Street, a screen door closed gently, and the Charleston night went on without them, the way it always had. 3 weeks passed in the slow, ordinary way that a company stabilizes when the right person has been given the right authority. Hadley's first board meeting as chair and chief executive was a Wednesday in mid-July. The stabilization plan passed 9-3. Bradford Pemberton's embezzlement, traced back through Heritage Restoration Specialists, LLC, and 2 related vendor accounts, was quietly settled out of court for restitution and a confidential exit from the family business. Eleanor was in Palm Beach with 2 attorneys and a Manhattan reputation manager and was, by all reports, recovering. The Beaumont Inn restoration entered its final phase. On the Saturday of the 3rd week, Hadley drove to the Beaumont in jeans and a linen shirt and walked into the back garden the way an owner walks, not the way a visitor walks. The crew was thinning out. Silas was on the 2nd floor porch, with a rag and a can of teak oil, working on the railing. The crew had wound down to 7 men. Most of the heavy carpentry had been finished in August. What remained was finish work, the patient kind. The kind where men who had been masons for 30 years would put on cotton gloves to lay a single tile straight. Silas had stopped checking emails from Boston 3 weeks before. The Boston office was running itself, the way it had always quietly run itself. He had not yet decided when he would tell them he was not coming back. Wren saw Hadley first. She came down the brick path at a run, paper folded in both hands. She stopped 2 feet in front of Hadley and held the paper up. I drew you. Hadley took it carefully. She unfolded it, a child's drawing, in colored pencil, on the back of a piece of restoration plan paper. 3 figures stood under a single large tree. The figures had no labels. One was tall and wore a flannel shirt. One was shorter and wore a navy dress. One was small with a dark braid. The tree had white flowers the size of a child's palm. Hadley looked at the drawing for a long time. She did not say thank you. She did not say it was beautiful. She did not say anything at all. She knelt down on the brick, eye level with Ren, and folded the paper back along its crease with the care of a person handling something that does not exist twice. She put it in the inside pocket of her shirt. Ren nodded once, satisfied, and ran off to investigate a ladybug on the magnolia trunk. Silas was watching from the second-floor porch. He had stopped working some time ago. That evening, after the crew had packed up and the project trailer had gone dark, Hadley and Silas sat on the brick steps of the garden. The harbor had gone quiet. The cicadas had started, soft. The light above the back door was on, throwing a thin yellow stripe across the brick. Her hand rested on the step beside her. His hand rested on the step beside him, 3 inches between them. Neither of them moved. Neither of them needed to. After a long while, she said, "The Beaumont reopens in December. I know. There's going to be a dedication. All right. For the garden." He turned his head and looked at her, slowly, in the half-light. "What will you call it?" She told him. He looked down at the brick between his hand and hers. The corner of his mouth moved, almost imperceptibly, the way a man's mouth moves when he is keeping something from breaking. "That would have made her happy," he said. The cicadas kept on. December came to Charleston the way it always did, with thin gold light and a cold breeze off the harbor that made coats necessary by 5 p.m. The Beaumont Inn reopened on a Saturday, the 11th, with a small ceremony in the walled garden behind the building. 80 people attended. The mayor sent a deputy. The Historic Preservation Board sent its chair. Greta came in a black wool coat and stood at the back and did not say a word to anyone. Greta had brought a small bouquet, 3 white camellias, in a mason jar tied with string. She set it at the base of the magnolia before the ceremony began. She did not sign her name to it. She did not need to. Marin had taught Greta to fold a linen napkin in 1997, and Greta had not forgotten. The magnolia had lost its blossoms months ago, but the tree itself was lit from below with 3 small uplights that the lighting crew had installed at Silas's quiet recommendation. The light caught the underside of the branches and made the empty crown look like a kind of architecture. A small bronze plaque had been set into the brick at the base of the trunk. The Marin Pemberton Renwick Memorial Garden. Hadley spoke for 4 minutes without notes. She did not speak about the company. She did not speak about her mother. She did not speak about the boardroom in June or the restoration or the 7 generations of Pemberton who had stood in this garden before her. She spoke about a cousin who had taught her to read a balance sheet at 16. She spoke about a woman who had sat on a bench in this garden every Sunday and called the magnolia the only honest thing on the property. She spoke about a name she had not been able to say out loud for a long time. She said the name 3 times. Marin, Marin, Marin. Then, she stepped back from the small lectern, and the crowd applauded the soft, slow applause of Charleston, which is the applause of people who do not need to make noise to mean what they mean. Silas stood at the back of the crowd with Ren on his shoulders. Ren wore a red coat. Her hands were on the top of his head. She was watching Hadley the whole time. When the crowd thinned, Hadley walked over to them. She did not speak first. Ren leaned down from Silas's shoulders and reached out one mittened hand. Hadley took it. The 3 of them stood under the magnolia. The plaque at their feet caught the last of the light. Hadley said, finally, very quietly, "Don't go back to Boston." Silas looked at her for a long moment. He did not smile. He looked at her the way a man looks at a thing he has been carrying toward for many years. "We weren't planning to." A beat. "If that's an invitation, we'll take it." She nodded. He nodded. Ren grinned then, wide and toothy and uncomplicated, because she was 8. And 8 knows what staying means before the grown-ups have agreed to the word. The 3 of them turned and walked down the brick path together toward the garden gate. The light went out of the sky in degrees behind them. The gate clicked shut. She had asked him to stay. He had been staying all along.